Einigkeit und Recht und Freiheit für das deutsche Vaterland.
Long before there was a country called Germany, there was a forest, not the Germany of highways and cities, not Berlin, not Munich, not even a united people, just vast forests stretching endlessly across Central Europe, cold rivers cutting through dark woods, and small tribes moving through mist and mud. The Romans called them Germania. To Rome, this land was wild, untamed, and dangerous. In the 1st century BCE, the Roman Empire expanded across Europe like an unstoppable machine. Roads, legions, order, and civilization, at least in their eyes. And when they reached the Rhine River, they looked across and saw something they didn't fully understand. On the other side were the Germanic tribes. They weren't one people and they weren't united either. They didn't call themselves German. They were Saxons, Cherusci, Goths, Vandals, dozens of tribes, each loyal to their own leaders, their own gods, and their own lands. Rome tried to conquer them. In 9 AD, 3 Roman legions marched deep into the Teutoburg forest, confident, organized, and professional. They never came back. An alliance of Germanic tribes ambushed them under a leader named Arminius, a man who had once served in the Roman army. The legions were surrounded, trapped, and destroyed. The defeat shocked Rome so badly that Emperor Augustus reportedly walked through his palace, shouting, "Varus, give me back my legions." After that, Rome stopped pushing deeper into Germania. The Rhine became a boundary, civilization on one side and wilderness on the other. But something important happened here. For the first time, outside forces began describing these tribes as one broad group, the Germans, an identity even if they didn't yet claim it. Over the next few centuries, as Rome weakened, these same tribes moved outward. Some crossed into Roman lands, some sacked cities, some carved out kingdoms of their own, such as the Goths, the Vandals, or the Franks. One group in particular would matter more than the rest, the Franks. Under a king named Clovis in the 5th century, the Franks united much of which is now France and Western Germany. They converted to Christianity. They built power not just with swords but with religion. And out of that Frankish kingdom would eventually rise a man who would change Europe forever. His name was Charlemagne. In the year 800 AD, he was crowned emperor by the Pope in Rome. It was presented as the rebirth of the Western Roman Empire. But it wasn't Rome anymore. It was something new, something that would become the foundation of medieval Germany. And yet, there was still no country called Germany. Only kingdoms, only princes, only shifting alliances. The idea of Germany was forming slowly, not as a nation, but as a collection of lands tied together by language, culture, and power struggles. It would take centuries before those lands would truly unite. And when they finally did, it would shake Europe. If this video opened your eyes to a history you never knew and you want more stories like this, please hit the subscribe button, like this video if you learned something new, and share it with someone who needs to see it, because these stories matter and the more we share them, the more the world remembers. In the year 962, a German king named Otto I was crowned emperor in Rome. And just like that, something enormous was born. It was called the Holy Roman Empire. It sounded powerful, ancient, and divine, but it was not holy, not truly Roman, and not really an empire in the way we think of one. It was a patchwork. Hundreds of kingdoms, duchies, bishoprics, free cities, all loosely connected under one emperor. Some were powerful, some were tiny, some were practically independent. This wasn't a united Germany. It was more like a complicated family gathering where everyone shared a language, but nobody agreed on anything. The emperor had prestige, yes, but his real power depended on cooperation from local princes, and those princes guarded their authority fiercely. They had their own armies, their own laws, and their own ambitions. Germany, for centuries, would grow up fragmented. While England centralized, while France strengthened under kings, the German land stayed divided, and then came religion. In 1517, a monk named Martin Luther nailed a document to a church door in Wittenberg. At least that's the story. It was meant as a debate about corruption in the church. It became something much bigger. Luther's ideas spread like wildfire across German lands. Printing presses multiplied his words. Princes saw opportunity, not just spiritual reform, but independence from the Pope. Germany became the heart of the Protestant Reformation, but with that came division. Catholic princes versus Protestant princes, neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother, and eventually in 1618, tension exploded into one of the most devastating conflicts Europe had ever seen, the 30 Years' War. For 30 years, armies marched across German soil. Foreign powers joined in: Sweden, France, and Spain. What began as a religious conflict became a brutal struggle for dominance. Villages were burnt, crops destroyed, entire regions were emptied. Some areas of Germany lost up to a third of their population. Imagine that, 1 out of every 3 people gone. By the time the war ended in 1648, the German lands were shattered. The Holy Roman Empire survived, but weaker than ever, more decentralized and more divided. And while other European powers were rising into global empires, building navies, colonizing continents, the German would remain fractured, exhausted, and cautious. There was culture, there was philosophy, there was music, Bach, later Beethoven, brilliance growing in pockets. But politically, Germany was still not a single country. It was a mosaic, and that fragmentation would shape everything that followed. Because when unity finally came, it would not come gently, it would come through iron. By the 1700s, the Holy Roman Empire still existed, but it was more shadow than substance. Among the many German states, one began to stand out: Prussia. It wasn't the richest, it wasn't the most beautiful, but it was disciplined, militarized, and efficient. Prussia was built on order. While other courts indulged in art and luxury, Prussian rulers built an army that would become the backbone of their identity: service, structure, and obedience. The state above the individual. And in the 18th century, under Frederick the Great, Prussia became a major European power. It defeated Austria, it expanded territory, and it earned respect. Still, Germany remained divided. Then came Napoleon. In the early 1800s, the armies of Napoleon Bonaparte swept across Europe and crushed the old Holy Roman Empire completely in 1806. After nearly 1,000 years, it simply dissolved. For many Germans, this humiliation did something unexpected. It sparked nationalism, the idea that all German-speaking people should belong to one nation. Students, writers, and philosophers began asking, why are we divided? Why are we weak together but strong apart? But ideas alone don't unite nations. Power does. And the man who understood that better than anyone was Otto von Bismarck. In 1862, Bismarck became the Prime Minister of Prussia. He was not sentimental, not idealistic. He was cold, strategic, and calculating. He famously said that the great questions of the time would not be decided by speeches and majority decisions, but by iron and blood, and he meant it. First, he defeated Denmark, then Austria, then France. Each war was carefully planned, short, and decisive, designed to push smaller German states into Prussia's orbit. Then, in 1871, after defeating France in the Franco-Prussian War, something historic happened. In the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, in the heart of France, the German princes proclaimed a new empire, the German Empire. Prussia's king became Kaiser Wilhelm I. For the first time in history, Germany was unified. After centuries of fragmentation, of princes and bishoprics and shifting loyalties, there was finally one German nation. It was powerful, industrial, and ambitious. Factories multiplied, railways expanded, science and engineering flourished. Germany rapidly became one of Europe's strongest economies. But unity had come through war, and that shaped the character of the empire. It was proud and confident, and it was rising fast. Too fast for some of its neighbors. Because when a new power rises in Europe, balance shifts, alliances formed, and tensions build. And by the early 1900s, the continent was like a room filled with gunpowder, and all it needed was a spark. By 1914, Germany was young, powerful, and impatient. In just a few decades, it had transformed from scattered kingdoms into an industrial giant. Railways stretched across the land. Its army was feared. Its scientists were admired. But its rise unsettled Europe. Britain ruled the seas. France still remembered its humiliation in 1871. Russia was vast and unpredictable. Alliances formed quietly, like invisible lines drawn across a map. And then in June 1914, a single assassination in Sarajevo triggered something no one could stop. World War I began. Germany entered the war confident. Its generals believed in speed, strike France quickly in the west and then turn east towards Russia. But war did not move according to plans. The Western Front became a nightmare of trenches, mud, barbed wire, endless artillery fire. Months turned into years. Millions died for meters of land. The war drained everything. Food shortages hit German cities. Families waited for letters that never came. The once proud empire began to feel the weight of exhaustion. By 1918, the situation was hopeless. Allies were advancing, workers went on strike, and in November, the Kaiser abdicated and fled the country. The empire that had been declared in triumph at Versailles ended in collapse. Germany surrendered, but the war did not end cleanly. In 1919, Germany was first to sign the Treaty of Versailles, and the humiliation cut deep. The treaty blamed Germany for the war. It stripped away territory, limited its army, demanded massive reparations payments. Many Germans felt betrayed. They had been told they were strong, victorious, yet now they were defeated, punished and economically crippled. The monarchy was gone. In its place came a fragile democracy, the Weimar Republic. It was modern, it promised rights, representation, and cultural freedom. And for a brief moment in the 1920s, Germany experienced something extraordinary. Berlin became one of the most vibrant cities in the world. Art exploded, cinema flourished, jazz filled nightclubs, philosophers debated, and scientists made breakthroughs. But beneath the energy, instability remained. Hyperinflation struck in 1923. Money became almost worthless. People carried cash in wheelbarrows just to buy bread. Then came the Great Depression in 1929. Banks collapsed, unemployment skyrocketed, fear returned, democracy felt weak, divided and ineffective. And in times of fear, people begin searching for certainty. For someone who promises strength, someone who says, "I will restore your pride." And in the early 1930s, that voice grew louder. His name was Adolf Hitler. When Adolf Hitler became Chancellor in 1933, many Germans did not see a dictator. They saw a promise of jobs, of restored pride, of national revival after years of humiliation and economic pain. The Nazi Party moved quickly. Political opponents were arrested, independent media was silenced, and trade unions were dissolved. Within months, Germany was no longer a fragile democracy. It was a one-party state. Fear became a tool. Propaganda filled newspapers, radios, and schools. Children were taught loyalty to the Führer. Rallies displayed power and unity. Symbols and uniforms created a sense of belonging. But beneath the spectacle, something far more dangerous was growing. The regime began targeting minorities, especially Jewish citizens. At first, through boycotts and discrimination, then through laws stripping them of rights, then through violence. In 1938, during Kristallnacht, synagogues burned across Germany. Jewish businesses were destroyed. Thousands were arrested. The descent was accelerating. Meanwhile, Hitler rebuilt the military, openly defying the Treaty of Versailles. He reoccupied territories that had been taken after World War I. He annexed Austria. He demanded part of Czechoslovakia. Europe hesitated. Some leaders believed they could avoid war through compromise. They were wrong. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. 2 days later, Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. At first, Germany seemed unstoppable. Poland fell. France collapsed in weeks. Much of Europe was under Nazi control. But conquest came with brutality. Behind the front lines, the regime carried out a systematic campaign of genocide, the Holocaust. Millions of Jews, along with Roma, disabled individuals, political prisoners, and others were deported to concentration and extermination camps. Families were separated. Communities were erased. It was industrialized mass murder. This was not just war. It was ideology turned into machinery. By 1941, Germany expanded its invasion eastwards into the Soviet Union. The war grew vast and devastating. Entire cities were destroyed. Soldiers froze in brutal winters. Casualties mounted. Then in 1941, after Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, the United States entered the war. The tide began to turn. Allied forces pushed from the west. The Soviet army advanced from the east. East, German cities were bombed heavily. Civilians suffered. Infrastructure crumbled. By April 1945, Soviet troops had reached Berlin. The city lay in ruins. In a bunker beneath the capital, Hitler took his own life. Days later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe ended in May 1945. What remained was devastation. Millions dead, cities destroyed, a nation morally shattered. The world had witnessed the consequences of extremism, hatred, and unchecked power. And now, Germany faced not just physical rebuilding, but moral reckoning. The question was no longer how to be powerful. It was how to exist again after becoming the symbol of one of history's greatest tragedies. When World War II ended in 1945, Germany did not immediately become whole again. It became occupied. The victorious powers, the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France, divided the country into 4 zones. Even Berlin, though deep inside Soviet territory, was split into sectors. At first, this division was meant to be temporary, but the world was already changing. Trust between the Soviet Union and the Western Allies quickly evaporated. Suspicion turned into rivalry. Rivalry hardened into the Cold War. By 1949, the split became permanent. In the West, the Federal Republic of Germany was established, a democratic state aligned with the United States and Western Europe. In the East, the German Democratic Republic was formed, a socialist state under Soviet influence. 2 Germanys, 2 governments, 2 ideologies. Families found themselves separated by borders that had not existed before. Political systems shaped daily life differently on each side. West Germany focused on rebuilding through democracy and capitalism. With American support under the Marshall Plan, its economy surged in the 1950s and 60s. Factories reopened, cities were rebuilt, living standards rose dramatically. It became known as the economic miracle. Meanwhile, East Germany operated under a centralized socialist system. Industry was state-controlled. Political dissent was tightly restricted. The secret police monitored citizens closely. And then in 1961, the division became physical. The Berlin Wall was built. Overnight, concrete and barbed wire cut through streets, neighborhoods, and even families. Windows were bricked up, roads were blocked. Escape became dangerous. The wall did not just divide a city, it divided a nation's heart. For nearly 3 decades, Germany lived this way, separated but connected by memory. West Berlin stood as a symbol of freedom inside communist territory. East Germans risked everything to escape, and yet life continued. Children grew up, generations adapted, some accepted the system, others quietly resisted, but change was coming. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union itself was weakening. Economic stagnation and political reform were shaking Eastern Europe. In 1989, protests erupted in East Germany. Thousands marched peacefully, demanding freedom of movement and political reform. And then, almost by accident, history accelerated. In November 1989, a confused government announcement led crowds to gather at the Berlin Wall checkpoint. Guards, unsure and overwhelmed, opened the gates. People crossed, they climbed the wall, they embraced strangers, they cried, they celebrated. After 28 years, the wall had fallen. In 1990, Germany was officially reunified, one nation again. But reunification was not instant harmony. The economic gap between the East and the West was large. Infrastructure differed, memories differed. The process of blending 2 systems into one would take years. Still, it marked a turning point. Germany had faced empire, defeat, dictatorship, genocide, division, and now it was rebuilding again, not as a military power but as something different. When Germany reunified in 1990, celebration filled the streets, but beneath the joy was uncertainty. How do you merge 2 economies that had operated under completely different systems for 4 decades? How do you reconnect families who grew up separated by ideology? How do you rebuild trust, not just within the country but with the world? Reunification was expensive. West Germany invested heavily in rebuilding the East, modernizing infrastructure, restructuring industries, and creating new opportunities. It was not easy. Unemployment rose in the former East. Frustration surfaced, but over time, something remarkable happened. Germany stabilized. It did not seek dominance through military strength like in earlier eras. Instead, it leaned into diplomacy, economic power, and integration with Europe. Germany became one of the strongest economies in the world. Its engineering, automotive industry, and manufacturing became global symbols of precision and reliability. Cities like Berlin, Munich, and Frankfurt became centers of culture, finance, finance, and innovation. But Germany's modern identity is shaped just as much by memory as by progress. The country openly confronts its past. Memorials stand in major cities honoring the victims of the Holocaust. Education emphasizes historical responsibility. Public discourse often reflects a deep awareness of where unchecked nationalism can lead. Rather than deny history, modern Germany built its identity around learning from it. Internationally, Germany became a leading voice within the European Union. It supported cooperation over confrontation, economic unity over isolation. At times, leadership came with pressure. During the European debt crisis, Germany's financial strength placed it at the center of difficult decisions affecting the entire continent. Then came new global challenges, migration waves, geopolitical tensions, economic shifts, energy concerns. Each moment tested the balance between responsibility and caution. Modern Germany is not perfect. No nation is. There are debates about immigration, economic inequality, energy policy, and the future of Europe. Political movements rise and fall. Generational divides shape conversations. But what stands out is this: Germany has transformed itself more than once, from fragmented states to empire, from empire to collapse, from dictatorship to division, from division to democracy. Few countries have experienced such dramatic shifts in a single century, and fewer still have rebuilt themselves so completely. Today, Germany stands not as a symbol of aggression, but as a symbol of reconstruction, proof that even after the darkest chapters, nations can choose a different path. But to understand Germany fully, we must step back and reflect on the entire journey. Germany's story is not simple. It is not a straight line of glory. It is not a clean narrative of progress. It is a story of brilliance and catastrophe, of ambition and consequence, of destruction and renewal. It began with scattered tribes in dense forests resisting Rome. It rose into kingdoms and principalities within the Holy Roman Empire, fragmented yet culturally rich. It unified in 1871 with confidence and steel, becoming an industrial giant almost overnight. It collapsed under the weight of World War. It descended into one of humanity's darkest chapters under Nazi rule. It was divided by ideology, split by concrete, and separated by fear. And yet, it rebuilt again and again. What makes Germany's history so powerful is not just the scale of its rise or the depth of its fall. It is the willingness to confront the past, to remember and to teach it, to build memorials instead of myth. Modern Germany does not erase its darkest era. It studies it, it acknowledges it, it carries it as a warning, and in doing so, it has reshaped its identity. Today, when people think of Germany, they think of engineering, efficiency, football, culture, philosophy, music, and economic strength. But beneath all of that lies something deeper. A nation that understands what happens when power is not balanced with responsibility. A nation that learned painfully that unity without tolerance can become dangerous. History is not just about dates and wars, it is about choices. Germany's story reminds us that nations can fall, but they can also rise again differently, stronger not because they dominate, but because they learn. And that is the entire history of Germany. Yeah, so that's the story. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe because I'm trying to grow this channel and I promise the history only gets better from here. Imagine watching till the end and not subscribing. Please don't be that person. Like the video, drop a comment, and I'll see you in the next country. Bye!